Hello and welcome. My name is Erin Benedict, and I'm a program officer at the Center for Women's Economic Empowerment at the Center for International Private Enterprise, also known as CIPE. On behalf of CIPE and the Papua New Guinea Business Advocacy Network, known also as the PNG BAN, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to the launch of Papua New Guinea's first Women's Business Agenda. For the past 2 years, a coalition of local businesswomen, civil society leaders, and other stakeholders have engaged in dialogue and consensus building with the ultimate goal of launching a business agenda. Based on a set of recommendations generated through the November 2019 PNG Women's Forum, this coalition has worked to develop proposed policy solutions for pressing economic issues. Launching today, this business agenda highlights the coalition's reform priorities to empower women in business. We have an exciting program planned for you today, featuring a presentation on the business agenda, remarks from coalition members, and a panel discussion on the key issues impacting women in business in PNG. In a few moments, I'll turn the floor to a few of my CIPE colleagues to offer welcome remarks, as well as an overview of CIPE's work in Papua New Guinea and the Pacific. Please first allow me to introduce Heidi Otiwani, our National Sign Language interpreter for this event. Additionally, before our program begins, I would like to take a moment to recognize and congratulate the steering committee of the PNG Business Advocacy Network. The steering committee is the leading body of the PNG BAN and has overseen the development of this agenda. The 7 steering committee members who have led this effort are Chairperson Cecile Nelson Congoi, Deputy Chair Jacqueline Bogagara, Treasurer Akai Beach, Secretary Bronwyn Kili, Diane Aikung, Luania Tamu, and Priscilla Kevin. Now I will turn the floor to my colleague, Barbara Langley, Director of the Center for Women's Economic Empowerment. And following Barbara's comments, we will hear from Ellie Webb, CIPE Country Director for PNG. Barb, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much, Erin. Good evening from the Washington, D.C. area, and of course, good morning to all of you there in Papua New Guinea. It's wonderful to be with you today, and we're really excited for this effort. As I get started, I just wanted to acknowledge any honorable officials that are attending in the audience, to our distinguished guests, and to my dear friends of the Papua New Guinea Business Advocacy Network, or PNG BAN. It really is a sincere honor for me to be with you today. As Erin mentioned, my name is Barbara Langley, and I'm the Director for the Center for Women's Economic Empowerment at the Center for International Private Enterprise, or CIPE, as we're more commonly known. Please allow me to extend my sincere gratitude to both the PNG BAN and the steering committee for this kind invitation to address you today. I would also like to thank the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor for their support of the PNG Women's Business Agenda. CIPE and DRL both believe that the success of this effort is due to the leadership, ownership, and strategic decision-making of our local partners within the PNG BAN. What an amazing achievement this is that you are making in the virtual environment to launch a women's business agenda for Papua New Guinea. It's incredibly important, particularly as we get through this pandemic, for countries to prioritize women as they navigate economic recovery and ensure that the gains in women's empowerment over the past decades are not lost. For those of you who may not be familiar with CIPE, let me offer just a few quick remarks about our organization and our cherished partnership with the PNG BAN. CIPE is a nonprofit affiliate of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, working internationally to promote private sector-led approaches to the most difficult economic challenges in developing markets. Our organization was launched in 1983 as one of the 4 core institutes of the National Endowment for Democracy. This foundational blend means that our work is uniquely situated at the intersection of democracy promotion and free market enterprise. 2 years ago, CIPE established a Center of Excellence for Women's Economic Empowerment to better promote its thought leadership and expertise on this critical issue, and to help advance strategies piloted with proven impact from our regional teams. CIPE's projects are active in 6 regions of developing markets, including nearly 80 countries currently, with dozens of field offices and representatives ensuring that democracy and free market economies deliver for the most vulnerable populations, including women-owned and led businesses. I met members of the PNG band in February 2020 during my trip to Port Moresby, just before the pandemic hit. And I'm excited to see that our collaborative efforts to launch a strong coalition focused on issues that bring unity are paying off. I do hope that we can travel again soon and meet each other in person again. This women's business agenda for Papua New Guinea that you all have produced is incredibly important to ensure that women's leadership in helping your country to break down barriers to women in business, and serves as an example for your neighbors, both within the Pacific Islands, in Asia, and of course around the world. You join a number of colleagues across the world that have successfully navigated the business agenda process and produced a product that represents the voice of a diverse group of women in the private sector, as well as their male champions, and serves as the foundation for advocacy with government officials on a set of priority issues and policy solutions. I really have been amazed at the impact of business agendas CIPE has supported around the world, and I'm really excited about the possibility of your success. Just as an example, in Bangladesh, CIPE's partner, the Bangladesh Women's Chamber of Commerce and Industry, tackled the way commercial loans were implemented in the country. Their advocacy led to 65% of banks launching a specialized desk for women borrowers staffed with specially trained personnel that knew how best to serve women business owners. The subsequent impact analysis found that $95 million was loaned to about 10,000 women business owners in just a few short years as a result. This allowed women business owners to scale their businesses up, employ more workers, and to contribute to a much more prosperous society. When I speak to our colleagues around the world, I often use the example of Papua New Guinea for the incredible example of a coalition that the PNG band has organized. The reach that this coalition of nearly 60 women private sector leaders and men as champions of women's empowerment is exciting and has the potential to attract even more women and men from across all regions of the country to join for future iterations of the women's business agenda. Already, the coalition has witnessed impact in advocating on behalf of its members simply by maintaining regular communications, highlighting issues of concern, and raising those issues and possible solutions with those that can enact change. Certainly, the launch of the women's business agenda is advantageous as upcoming elections will allow you to ensure that the priority issues for women are a part of the policy debate. Please know that we stand in solidarity with you. In fact, in 2022, CIPE is supporting women's business agendas in such countries as the Kyrgyz Republic, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Nigeria, Moldova, and Morocco. Even our friends in Afghanistan, who publicly launched their women's business agenda prior to the Taliban takeover, are still using elements of that business agenda to find space for women's business owners to continue their work. We're always looking for ways to connect with our partners to exchange experience, ideas, and strategies, and we'll include an invitation for networking for the band in the coming months. Congratulations again. Thank you, and know that CIPE and its partners of women in the private sector and men as champions of women's empowerment stand with you in solidarity and are eager to work with you to ensure that democracy delivers for women in Papua New Guinea. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Barb. I was sitting here waiting, oh, is somebody going to let me know? And then I realized, no, that's right, I'm supposed to jump on. Hi, everybody, good morning and welcome. My name is Ellie Webb and I work with the Centre for International Private Enterprise, or CIPE, as the country director in PNG. So as we would all attest, there's no one size fits all in policy or program to address the compounding issues that continue to challenge us, particularly if we're looking to provide better enabling spaces for SMEs, increasing the levels of gender inclusion capacities, leadership capacities, and of course, equality in the economic space in Papua New Guinea. However, despite all these challenges, we can see dents that are being made. There is progress that's happening, albeit slowly. And recognizing achievable practices is the challenge of public and private sectors alike right across the globe and really specific to Papua New Guinea. So finding the gap is where CIPE has been able to apply some innovative design and implementation to addressing various social impact issues, and in Papua New Guinea specifically in women's economic empowerment. So as Barb mentioned, CIPE has over 30 years of experience on women's economic development programs. We've implemented programs in more than 60 countries. I think it's closer to 80 countries now. And of course, with the introduction of the Centre of Excellence that Barb described earlier. We firmly believe that to improve the conditions for women's entrepreneurship, there needs to exist a supporting ecosystem of associated institutions that encourage that entrepreneurial mindset, enable the environment for our women to achieve this mindset and deliver strong entrepreneurial activity. So much of our work involves engaging with chambers of commerce, business associations, policy think tanks, and other private sector organisations to advance these policy reforms to improve the business enabling environment. I'm talking and my brain's telling me, slow down, Ellie. So that's why I'm sort of thinking like my eyes are moving at the same time. In 2015, CIPE launched an initiative in collaboration jointly funded by both the Australian and US governments under the Pacific Women Shaping Pacific Nations banner, working with partners to encourage, support and reward women's entrepreneurship. We commenced the groundwork for the introduction of an entrepreneurial ecosystem, which included the opening of a PNG Women's Business Resource Centre, or how it's known more commonly as PNG WBRC. And this is the first of its kind in Papua New Guinea and throughout the Pacific, with a view to provide this resource hub, this central resource hub, if you will. The section of our programming, this section is the largest of our offerings in the region and has been so successful, we've actually duplicated the PNG WBRC model in 2 other countries, being Afghanistan and Guatemala, with concrete plans to continue this duplication in several other emerging markets. So really exciting return on investment to see this model continue to grow. To support this activity, CIPE PNG in 2017 successfully commenced implementation of a support and technical advisory role with 4 premier universities in PNG to both introduce and or supplementing existing educational curricula with entrepreneurship courses at the PNG universities. So this relationship has continued to grow 5 years on, expanding around the diversity of the type of support that CIPE has been able to provide to these institutions. CIPE PNG's third prong of work is to look at promoting structured advocacy for women in the business space and the policies that represent this environment through investments, as Barb mentioned, by the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labour, or DRL, at the US Department of State. So the aim of CIPE in relation to the advocacy portion of our work was to start leading the discussions around formalising a women's business agenda in PNG. This is an initiative that's been developed with by CIPE, with incredible successes in several locations around the globe. So you're going to hear briefly from our independent researcher, Dr. Pamela Kamya. The need for the WBA was well supported by Prime Minister James Marape during the 2019 Women's Forum, as well as through informed discussions and feedback from PNG women who attended the forum and throughout the consultations that have continued over the last 2 years. CIPE's always going to promote the value of working collaboratively with other programs, partners, stakeholders, donors alike that share this ultimate objective to increasing women's economic opportunities and exploring how various entities in this space can work together jointly. It's critical to this functioning entrepreneurial ecosystem. Everybody has the mantra, I use it, why reinvent the wheel? I adjust it and say, let's just figure out how to make it go a little bit faster. So with the valuable data captured from our consultation efforts, the next step in this WBA process was to gather an engaged group of diverse representatives who'd be willing to join this coalition, which we've done. It's been incredible, and that continues to grow. It's an organic coalition. The Business Advocacy Network, or BAN, was born. And so when we established that this would be the vehicle with which the women's business agenda would be propelled through these required process steps, and to look at, possibly changing the whole business culture and practice with a hope to improve public sector practices. Essentially it is the right of all of us, Papua New Guinean citizens, to place expectation on our government to set the standard. And in the absence of such standards where the WBA may be able to provide action steps in response to the asks of our women via these consultations, government implements, adjusts, improves, private sector follows, or in this case, it might be reciprocated. And eventually you see the culture change that becomes evident. As much as we would all love for this flow to be as easy as 1, 2, 3, or as I've described, it's not. But the WBA design promotes this private sector driving the suggestions, the recommendations, and where possible change. So this expanding of local collaboration by looking at the best practices, utilising existing services in the market that are already being delivered, can in some instances prove more cost efficient. And, for CIPE and the BAN moving forward, we've got to ensure good governance. Strong foundations are instilled from the get-go. This is going to be key for long-term sustainability. And with the WBA to present evidence-based recommendations, the contributions will be further enhanced by this proactive and constructive engagement, holding the conveners of the recommended actions to account, particularly in government, and overall seeking and ensuring buy-in to everybody who's intent on working towards the same or similar objectives of increasing women's economic empowerment and inclusive economic growth in Papua New Guinea. I'm really looking forward to sharing this culmination of the last 2 years of consultant research as we launch the first women's business agenda in PNG. Thank you, and I'll hand back to my colleague, Erin.
Thank you so much to both Barb and Ellie for your opening remarks. With that, we are going to go ahead and play a few recorded videos from our researcher, Dr. Pamela Kamya, and a few coalition members diving into the methodology of creating the business agenda.
The first women's business agenda for Papua New Guinea was developed through a rigorous consultation process endorsed by the PNG Business Advocacy Network that aimed to increase advocacy to policymakers, private sector, and development partners to grow women's participation in the PNG economy. Consultation started with a National Women's Forum from the 6th to the 7th of November in 2019, with representation of women from 22 provinces, both in rural and urban centers of Papua New Guinea. From the discussions of the PNG women had during the forum, PNG BAN identified issues of priority for action through policy reform and legislation. The PNG BAN then established a steering committee in 2020, consisting of leading Papua New Guinean women in government, policy, business, senior management, and further, a young female representative to compose the first women's business agenda around 4 priority issues they had identified. The steering committee engaged in key informant discussions with key technical experts across the priority issues to inform greater understanding of the issues and to identify policy action recommendations that can be advocated for by the PNG BAN to policymakers, private sector, and development partners. The steering committee also engaged in focus group discussions with various women's groups, both in the National Capital District of Papua New Guinea and in select provinces around the country, to inform and shape the policy action recommendations. The steering committee utilized technical support from a researcher to then compile the key issues and recommendations for advocacy that was vetted through the PNG BAN. This culminated into the first Women's Business Agenda document that is launched today.
Hi, my name is Cecile Nelson Congoi. I'm from East CIPE province. and I work as the Media and Communications Manager for ExxonMobil PNG. For the PNG Business Advocacy Network, the PNG BAN, I represent the network as chairperson, a role that I've been in since last year. Why I joined the BAN is I feel that there are a lot of issues affecting our women folk that really needs an organization to come together as a collective and represent the voices of women. And that's all the way from Parliament into the boardrooms to make effective policy decisions at the government level that will enable the others in private sector to be able to implement some of the changes. I want to see more women represented where it matters in Parliament, in decision making at the highest levels. That's one of my main impetus for joining PNG BAN, because I see that it's one of their platforms or pillars for action. Thank you.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the launch. My name is Jacqueline Bogagara, and I come from the Central Province. I'm currently the Deputy Chair for the PNG Business Advocacy Network. My role on this PNG Business Advocacy Network came about as a result of the inclusion of the organizations of persons with disabilities. I'm currently the female co-chair for the PNG Assembly of Disabled Persons, as well as the interim chair for the Women with Disabilities Network in PNG. This is a very exciting time for women in PNG, as I feel that the Women's Business Agenda, which will be launched today, is an important platform for women in PNG to participate in the economy. And why I say this is because currently women are limited in their access to basic services such as health, education, employment, and even in accessing finance or finance products, and participating more meaningfully in the economy. And I feel that this is an important time, and it's a call to government to review their existing policies and legislation to ensure that the policies and legislation are more supportive of women's participation in the economy and having access to financial services, and to be able to operate businesses that can contribute to the economy. And through women's participation in the economy, they will be able to access basic services such as health, education, employment. And I see this launch as an exciting opportunity for not only government stakeholders, but also for the private enterprise to review their current mode of doing business and to see how they can promote and support more women in the formal economy through creating avenues that support women's participation in the economy. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, I'm Luania Tamu, General Manager for Savitek Limited in Papua New Guinea. I'm also honored to be part of the PNG BAN SC and have learned quite a lot in the last 2 years from my fellow SC members as well as CIPE and other coalition members and partners here. I do thank you, and I extend a warm thanks to all you wonderful people who have joined us this morning for this launch. Thank you for sharing in this journey with us, and also thank you for being so gracious with your advice as well. So the BAN SC was formed in the beginning of 2020 And over the last 2 years, in spite of everything that's happened with COVID and the restrictions, we've been able to push through. And thank goodness for technology and platforms such as Zoom to allow us to do that. As part of that process, we were able to have 6 consultative meetings as well with coalition members, gaining much insight, much advice that was also critical in the formation of the agenda. And so I do again offer and extend a very warm thanks on behalf of the PAC. Part of those consultative meetings led into invites to closed-door discussions with key partners. Some of those were the post-Bougainville PNG referendum consultative processes that were hosted by NDI. We were fortunate to be a part of 3 of those closed-door discussions. And we learned quite a lot from our Bougainville sisters who have already led the way and who are moving their agendas within the Senate. Another very key meeting that we had was with the Nigerian Business Network, so our sister network in Nigeria. We learned from those meetings and those discussions how powerful a platform like this can be in moving the agenda, not just for women in business, but women in general. It was inspiring to hear the testimonies and also the stories from women who have gone through this process before and who are now seeing the fruition of all those consultative meetings with partners come to life in the form of legislation and allowing the women to have more decisions being invited to the table that was previously dominated by men. And that's our hope that we want to achieve with this agenda as well here in Papua New Guinea, and we believe that it's possible. And thirdly, we had the honor of being invited to APEC platform. We were able to talk and I guess share our experiences on how digital platforms can be quite pivotal in pushing forward the business agenda here. As a woman who is in this space who is constantly coming up against the glass ceilings, these sort of meetings were very critical, very impactful in how we were able to come back and also translate that to our sisters on this SC and also our partners as well. Just sharing that information. So I guess in terms of our lifespan, we haven't been in operation for that long, but I think we've made quite a heavy impact already in the last 2 years. And I do extend a very warm thanks to our partners, CIPE, who have been there every step of the way, guiding us as we learn how to make this a PNG-led agenda. And also providing those key partnerships, opening the doors for those key partnerships for which launches like this are now made possible. So I do thank you again for all the partnerships and all the partners that are here today this morning. Thank you.
Excellent. With that, we are now onto the panel portion of the event. I'd like to extend a warm welcome and thank you to our panelists. First, joining us today is Cecile Nelson Congoi, the esteemed chairperson of the PNG Business Advocacy Network. Next is Luania Tamu, a steering committee member of the PNG BAN. We have with us Celia Ranasinghe, Executive Director for the Center for Excellence in Financial Inclusion, Bonnie Nettis, founder of M Street Holdings Limited, and finally, Brenda Andreas, Program Manager for UN Women's Safe and Prosperous Districts Program and the Markets, Economy, Recovery, and Inclusion Program. So we will go ahead and dive into questions. First, for Luania, the business agenda captures several recommendations for policy reviews led by external committees rather than government departments. Can you please expand on the role of special committees in the legislative process and how they enhance women's representation? How and why should women in the private sector engage with external committees?
Hi, thank you, Erin, and thank you everyone that has joined the call this morning. I think I'm having a little bit of technical glitches here on this side, so if I do drop out, please do let me know and I can come back and join and answer again. So thank you for the question. I think I'll take reference to Rwanda, one of the fastest growing economies in Central Africa, and with a GDP growth rate of about 8% per annum between 2001 and 2014. Now they have about 63, almost 64% of women in parliament representation, and that's allowed them to progress economic advancements, especially as it relates to the women, whether it be in business or just women in general. Bringing it back to the PNG context, we were extended an invite by our partner NDI last year to discuss progressive and proactive measures that our female sisters, members of the Bougainville Senate, are taking to advance the women's agenda over there. It's not an overnight solution. It is one that's been in place over the last couple of years, as they mentioned. And this was initiated by the people, for the people. It was set up, it was to set up special committees from village level all the way up to government. And they were proud to share that almost all of those committees, all the chair seats for those committees are actually occupied now by women. Such a profound result from visionaries that have put measures in place to ensure that women are occupying these roles in these decision-making groups. The ban, after extensive meetings with the wider coalition, also identified the lack of review committees within the government departments. We asked the questions, are there review committees in place that are actually reviewing and assessing current policies and legislation? Sadly, the response was not favorable. And so this is what we've been discussing and how we, I guess, wanted to align our pillars to take into account, look and assess what wasn't being done, and how we could fit into these models to progress the women's advancements here in the country. So I hope I answered that question, but I'm open to any other questions or any other thoughts. Thanks, Erin.
Thanks so much, Luania. And just to mention as well, we will have a Q&A portion at the end of this session. So for all of our attendees, you can see a Q&A box that appears at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Feel free to send those in now as the conversation goes on, and we will loop back around to them during the Q&A session. Great. So my next question is for Cecile. Women in rural areas have greater difficulty in accessing finance than women in Port Moresby and other urban areas. Please describe this divide. How can we ensure rural women benefit from financial inclusion, which is one of the big focuses of this agenda? And I think you might be on mute.
First, I should congratulate for this important initiative, and also it is great that we get an opportunity to speak at this important forum. Financial inclusion is a major challenge in Papua New Guinea. As you know, larger percentage of people doesn't have access to financial services. The statistics that we have today, as at September 2021, we had 3,473,678 bank accounts in Papua New Guinea. Out of that, 1,000,000 646 accounts were owned by women. Basically, what we are trying to do is to make sure that there is equal participation in women in the banking services in the country. So what we are doing is we are developing what we call a financial inclusion strategy, which basically trying to get additional 2 million people into the financial mainstream, out of which 50% has to be women. So we have a dedicated approach to attract more and more women into the financial mainstream. And coming to your question of how we can get the rural women into the banking services. As you know, the banks have changed their attitude from our original perception of the people should come to the bank. And now the banks are willing to go to their villages and open bank accounts. I think the women, rural women, should take this as an opportunity and try to get their services in. The second thing that I would like to say is that the move towards digital financial services. As you know, we have about 475 banking agents, digital banking agents in the country, scattered all over the country. You know, I think even in remote parts of the country. So they need not go to a bank branch now to do the banking transactions. They can go to the nearest agent and do banking transactions. So I hope that they will use this as an opportunity to move in there. And the third initiative that we are trying to bring the rural women in to the banking services is what we call a provincial government engagement program. We are devising a financial inclusion strategy for each of the province, and we are developing a provincial steering committee where there will be a women rep in that particular steering committee, and we wanted to bring more and more women into the financial mainstream. So all these things definitely is going to help them to have a higher percentage of women. At the moment, we have only 32% of the total bank accounts owned by women. We are looking forward to push it up to about 50%. And finally, I also would like to say that we also are in the process. Actually, the Bank of PNG is in the process of developing what we call a consumer protection framework, where this will provide the clients who are getting into the banking services quite a lot of protection, and also there will be a complaint handling mechanism that will give, basically empower the client when they work with the banking sector. So that's basically, I thought, what I should share, how we are trying to address this. And but only thing is, you know, one of the things that we really strongly feel is CIPE is dedicated to work with women. You know, recently what we did was that we conducted 3 digital training programs targeting about 170 SME women on 3 areas. One is digital financial services, because I think this is one of the areas that we feel the rural women, especially women, will really like to have it. And also the research recently conducted also reveals that they have said that they would like to have digital financial services because of 3 reasons. First, they said that it is safe. Nobody will know that we have the money. The second one is they said that we have no time to go to the town to do banking transactions. Here now you have an agent, you just go to the closest place and do banking transactions. And the third one, they said that we are able to take small amounts out. If I want 20 kina, I can take 20 kina out through our nearest banking agent. So that's a very important aspect. So that's one of the training we have done. The second one we conducted was what we call business planning and debt management. As you know, debt management remains a major challenge all over, and also CIPE is committed even to provide debt counseling services for women. If they really have an issue, they can get in touch with CIPE. And finally, we also conducted training on e-commerce for women, where we feel that e-commerce is going to be a new avenue for women to expand their businesses. So basically, this is what I thought that I will share with you. And if you have any other questions, I'm willing to answer. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you, Celia. That was excellent. And I hope some of our audience are able to ask follow-up questions on this topic as well. Moving on to Vani. COVID-19 has been a challenge for all women business owners, but how has the pandemic specifically impacted women in the informal economy? And again, assisting women in transitioning from the informal economy to the formal economy is a key focus of the business agenda. So what has been the impact on business women throughout the COVID-19 pandemic in the informal economy? And what protections do entry into the formal economy offer business women?
Thank you very much. That was a really great question. And I think, for the last 2 years, almost going towards, the third year where, COVID pandemic has really changed the way we, do things informal and informal business as well. And as we know, Papua New Guinea's, excuse me, informal economy is a sleeping giant with massive potential. And this untapped sector can be an engine for broad-based growth right across the country. And while we are trying to look at means and ways and solutions and how we can be able to help informal market into formal, I think part of the challenge is that there is a huge gap on how we can be able to bring them into the formal activity. I think one of the main reasons is that we got to encourage, if we want to actually create this economic activity, we need to make sure that we look at how we can be able to provide free tax so that they all can come and register their business while, making money and getting them educated into why is it important for them to be formal business as well. So, while the informal activities, covers, some legal enterprises that are not registered for taxation and not counted in GDP calculations, the informal economy is a lifeline of many of our Papua New Guineans PNG populations who depend on informal, say semi-subsistence sources of food and income. And we have seen that, we have witnessed that, and part of my life is being with these people on the ground. Our solution was, how can we help them to come and be part of the formal economy? And like COVID-19 has really challenged us big time. And we saw that as an opportunity on how we can be able to create platforms that we can continue to do business. And we say so many things that affects, women in business, say, financial, capacities, we say capital, and we say, we talk about, access to trade platforms where they can be able to market their products. Now, what is it that we all can come together to provide that? And, as a pandemic came through, and we have a hub, which is a co-working hub, which is Amsterdam Space, which is called Amsterdam Space. And in that, we provide entrepreneurial resources and how we can be able to help our SMEs or members of the hub, grow and bridge those gaps for them, look at what their challenges are, finding the solutions and connecting them to people so that they can be able to continue business. So when COVID came, we were able to provide that platform for many of our members who were in the hub, and that helped them to progress in their business than shutting down. And we have seen a lot of SMEs who have really challenged big time during the COVID pandemic. So coming back to us, we were actually looking at, what solutions can we provide? Of course, business was affected. They were not making the sales. They were, trade to actually sell their products was so difficult. So while that was going on, we launched, which is called ShopSmart PNG, which is an online marketplace. And we launched it to actually help our SMEs across Papua New Guinea to have an online shop because this is the way forward. We got to actually educate our people to get into this digital platform. But one of the challenges was that, not everybody has a bank account, and it becomes very challenging where, a grassroots person will have to fill in all those documentations to actually get a bank account. So how can we simplify those things for general, basic people who can be able to have access to this, so that we can be able to create, formal trade, business activities. So we in the hub, we have helped informal mothers or women in business into formal. And as we progress with that, we were also looking at, okay, how can we help them to trade? So we had a partnership with a mall, which is Vision City Mall. So we had a kiosk over there where our members can go and trade their products. And that's what's been happening for us at the end of the day, is that how can they make business every day? How can they make money every day? Because at the end of the day, these women go back into their communities, and the business that they do actually help people back in the villages, in the communities, and the little networks that they come from. So you can see the chain, the what do you call it? Their ecosystem, depending on the person that is doing business here in Moresby, and the supply that is coming back from wherever they are, of course, generate the funding to go and take care of the community. So I think, one of the things that we need to look into is that I'm sure we have done policies here and there, but it's not even trickling down to the grassroots or the SME level. We talk about all these financial inclusions, we talk about all these SME loans, but, it's hard. It's hard for SMEs and women. And I've seen a lot of women who are resilient, who have the potential to grow. Yes, there are women that we can train, that needs to be trained. There are women in the middle businesses where they need some mentoring and coaching. And there are women who are ready to scale. Do we have the investment capital to actually help them to, scale so that they can be able to continue the business and then go and help the communities at the end of the day? Who is going to open the pockets and say, yes, I believe in you, I have confidence in you, this is the investment that I'm going to put into you, so that you can be able to go and create the revolution or create the change. So coming back to Amstrad, we're a telco business, we're an ISP. And we've grown organically with or without the support of anybody else. It's very suppressing. I gotta be honest if I'm saying this. It's very suppressing in Papua New Guinea, and especially, women who wants to do it. But we do it because we know that what we are doing is going to impact somebody else. The platforms that we are creating is going to impact, and and we believe in collaboration. We believe in connecting. We believe in creating ideas so that we can be able to go back and help our people in the community. So having to grow this in the technology space, ISP, we have grown from strength to strength. I can share my experience. It's not easy to be in the technology field, but I think if you have the passion and if you want to create that value in everybody that you want to help around you, definitely you have to be, continue to pushing the boundaries. And I'm proud to say that, Amstrad is in 17 provinces. We're going around helping rural connectivities, giving access to women who are out there who needs this access. We've got the digital platform. We're onboarding people. We don't do extra marketing. We just go word by word, and the relationship that we have, and making them feel comfortable that yes, you can go into this space. So we've created that ecosystem where we build a resource that anybody that walks in can be able to grow in that hub. And so having said that, we've seen success stories in the hub. We've seen, an informal, mothers, growing their business, and I'm proud to say, and this is like, for me, it's inspiring for me that I always talk about this, lady who is just grade 6, education level is grade 6, but has been in the Boroko market for the last 25 years. And in 2019, when she joined the hub, and since then, she has grown from strength to strength, making her money every day. and now she's building a home, taking care of her people, expanding her business. And this is the partnership that we have with Vision City, with the kiosk that she goes and trades. She connects directly with her, people who wants to buy. So yes, so that's basically, what we have been doing. So I think there is a huge potential, but what we can do together is that find solutions to help them grow, enable them to develop, grow, and scale. So we've got to look at these capital investments on how we can help women invest in them so that they can scale. So I hope I have answered that question. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. That was excellent. We will next move to Brenda. UN Women has referred to the gender-based violence as the shadow pandemic, as incidents of domestic violence and other forms of gender-based violence have increased during COVID-19. Could you share insights on the impacts of COVID on violence against women and girls 1 year into the pandemic, and provide considerations for policymakers?
Hello, everyone. Hi, Erin. Good day and good morning to wherever you're joining from, depending on your time zone. I hope you all can hear me clearly. So thank you for this opportunity to be part of the launch of the Papua New Guinea Women's Business Agenda. I would like to start by congratulating everyone who has been involved in producing this document, and all of you who've worked towards arranging this really important discussion. So with the topic I'm discussing, I think at the onset, I'd like to just say that we do have persistent structural barriers for women, and violence against women has always been a pandemic in this country, even before COVID, happened to us. So if you look at the statistics and the incidence of occurrence of GBV, you have a very striking image of the kind of impact it has on women's lives. 2 out of 3 women often experience violence. And often when you have situations where you have conflicts and crisis erupting from such humanitarian crisis or outbreaks of such pandemics, often women are disproportionately affected and vulnerable populations because they're already disadvantaged in our society. So linking into the women's business agenda, and specifically looking at women's participation in the economy, I think what we need to be mindful, and we've certainly learned through our work, is that within the economy itself, there are women at different stages of their entrepreneurship activities. And then there are also women who are not accessing any formal pathways, who are solely dependent on the informal economy, and who are largely in unprotected, unregulated working environments. So when you look at the impacts of COVID-19 and the gendered impacts specifically, it gives you a sense of the disproportionate effects it has, especially on those who are already vulnerable in our society. So we call it the shadow pandemic because it's been there. It's been a pandemic in our society, but it hasn't received that much amplification that it should compared to COVID-19. And we compounded with those structural and existing barriers for women came the economic crisis that resulted from reduction in income levels. And you can see from a number of research that came out, and UNDP recently concluded a socioeconomic impact study, which revealed that over 90% job losses in the formal economy, especially in industries where you had within the tourism and travel industries. And often you'd find that a lot of women participate in those sectors. And they do also participate in a lot of unpaid care work within households. So they're also quite dependent on income generated by formal people who are formally employed. So overall, less cash in circulation within the formal economy, and ultimately resulting in less cash in circulation within the informal economy. So you can see the flow-on effects there. And within the household itself, we saw some breakdown of existing social networks. So in PNG, we always pride ourselves of the one-talk system. And we do say that we have social networks that allow us to provide for those most vulnerable in our society. But we did see some disintegration of such social networks, where you had a reduced number of employed personnel within a household, less cash in circulation within a particular household. There were increases in occurrences of violence within those households. And there's a number of factors involved here. The obvious one is the reduction in income, which does trigger, conflict within households. And often women do suffer more violence within such context. And there's also less income in circulation to support other groups, other populations, other dependent family members, often those who are most vulnerable. So I think we have to also look at some of the flow-on effects and some of the existing barriers that women face within the household and the community that does have an impact on how they participate in the economy. And then measures such as social protection programs that look at those most vulnerable and offer some kind of support would be a recommendation that I would be putting to policymakers who are looking at addressing such issues where you do not have a social welfare system, and you have communities that are and groups of people in our society who are more affected than others. So in such context, we really need to look at social protection programs, cash transfer programs that provide cash directly into the hands of those who are most vulnerable. Um, I think the other important thing is to ensure that women's voices are represented at all levels of decision making. And in our work, we try to make sure that women's voices within the informal economy and market specifically where UN Women works is represented. And I'd like to just connect what I'm saying to what Vani said about the informal economy policy. And the fact that it's important that all voices are represented. And currently we know that the government's reviewing the existing informal economy policy. And within that is the need to integrate the voice of women and to look at specific social protection measures that allow some kind of support for those who are recovering from the economic losses due to COVID-19. Apart from that, I can take any other questions. I know I have 1 minute left, so thank you. Over.
Great, excellent. Thank you so much for that, Brenda. Next, I'm going to loop back around to Luania to ask, how do we translate the policy level solutions covered in the business agenda to an average household? Where are the incentives for women to start and maintain a business with all the socioeconomic issues women in PNG experience daily? Oh, Luania, I think you're muted. Yeah.
Apologies. Great question, and I'll do my best to answer this question. I think from a practical point of view, how that can probably be applicable in the households would be, my idea of it anyway, would be pushing for more family-friendly workplace policies. And I don't know if that makes sense to anyone, but as the general manager of a company that has female staff here, we are constantly evolving our policies within the company to cater for our female staff. We've seen that on a practical side, this is increased productivity by allowing them flexibility for work hours. We've also provided avenues where we've we actually encourage them to start smaller businesses as well, because we understand just how difficult it is to get by on just one salary here. So I think from a practical side, and business people are very practical, we are constantly adapting. So my idea would be, my thoughts anyway, would be ensuring that policies are allowed to be more pragmatic when it's aligned with businesses and the realities of what we're facing here. I think that will trickle down more effectively into households and into families, into the family units as well. And we've seen the results here at Savitek already because of those measures that we've taken. I hope I've answered that very hard question.
I think you did. That was an excellent response. So just another reminder to our esteemed participants and guests, there is a Q&A feature. I see we've gotten a few questions in the Q&A, and we'll plan to move into these in just a moment, but please continue to send these through. We'd love to hear your feedback and what you think of the agenda rollout so far. With that, maybe we actually will start to move into the Q&A portion. So I will start with the first question. To Luania. Luania, sorry, we're giving you many questions. What did you mean by not favorable conditions in your comparison with the autonomous region of Bougainville and the rest of PNG, as far as having more women chairing committees? Where not favorable was referenced the rest of PNG. Also, what known outcomes have resulted from the Bougainville experience where women have chaired committees?
Well, I'm being picked on this morning. Okay, so there's two questions there, and I can't speak to the Bougainville insight. I can speak as a Papua New Guinean woman, so how I would answer that question, Patricia, is that if you look at the cultural differences between the two, Bougainville is a matrilineal society. So from a cultural perspective, the conditions, even from village level, already provide for a conducive environment that encourages affirmation, consultation with women leaders already. PNG, the larger island, we're culturally diverse here. So we're constantly coming up against cultural barriers that don't, in my opinion anyway, don't sometimes deter that the push to occupy these seats from both men and women. And I feel like that's probably the best I could do to answer that question. So I guess in terms of not favorable conditions, I was probably referring mainly to the cultural differences between the two. And the second question was, what are the known outcomes have resulted from the Arob experience where women have chaired committees? Well, I think having 4 to 5 women, correct me if I'm wrong, in Parliament, is a result of that push, is a result of those mandates in place to have women in these decision-making roles. And they have identified those gaps very well, pushing it from that community level all the way up, and then ensuring that the chairs that sit on these committees are women. So I think the results speak for itself with the female representation in Parliament. I hope that's answered that question.
Yes, that was excellent. So we'll give you a break for now, and we will loop back to Vani. Vani, what are your top 3 asks from government to best help women transition from the informal to the formal economy?
Yes, sorry, I was actually on mute. Yep, I think that is a really great question. And I think, not I think, but we all know that, government plays a great role in creating an enabling environment for um, small businesses, informal markets, and anybody for that factor, because to have easy access to platforms where they can trade and do business. And one of the things, there's so many things that I want the government to do, because at the end of the day, local businesses are doing amazing things. And if we all can, one of the things is that, create a database where which, informal sectors, and get them to register, so that what are the business that they are doing, so you can be able to educate them to bring them into the informal sector. And I think one of the things that government should prioritize is that, just say 5 years tax free for informal sectors, because when you talk to them, they will say that, oh, if I'm going to put my money in there, what service are we seeing? And this is how we are, we're making money, but if we're going to put our money in there, we're going to get taxed, and we don't see basic services that are supposed to come and enable us. So one of the things that I'd like for government to take into consideration is that look at the tax, give us tax-free raise, or give them, so that they can be able to start registering. And then once we educate them and get into that system where they see the benefits of getting them into the informal sector, then I believe it's just an easy way of getting them into the formal sector as well. And basically looking at identifying and supporting those income generation activities that are established by people with specialized skills, and those with a spark of originality, which is the most likely factors to sustainable and growth, which I think is one of the main things that we should look into working as well. So, and also collaborating more with the locals, creating an enabling environment. And if you look at what we all are facing, is that actually the cost of production of goods and services for small and medium enterprise is actually, an informal sector is actually, cost is high. So and for them to remain price competitive in local and perhaps in the international market, it becomes a little difficult, because the cost of bringing their goods from one area to another area, it multiplies. So how can we actually look at how to subsidize, freights, and how to subsidize, because most of them are not registered in the business. So they go through people, of just say, agents, to buy their product instead of going directly. So there's too many middle people. So we had to cut that out and get them into the system so that they can be able to trade easily. I think it's the second, right? So, and one of the things that government should do is that boost this industry and get them to actually be able to get into some educational informal education into formal education, so that they can be able to improve themselves and enable them as SMEs, and be able to stand to trade and do business with anybody that comes from outside, and export and import as well. So I think one of the things that we should do with the informal sector is basically create give them that education on how they can be able to be in formal sector, so that we give them that education, so they become aware of why they should become formal, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And just as a quick follow-up to that, can you speak to what percentage of GDP you think that this sleeping giant of women in the informal economy might add?
Oh man, I'm thinking, like, if you look at informal, like, say, for example, women, they're probably like 80% of women are in the informal sector. That's from the top of my head, and some of the readings that I have done in the past, but I think recently probably have changed over the years. So if you look at it, many look around the markets, you look around the villages, I think most of them are women. So I'd probably say, like 80% of them are in that area if you look at that. I hope I'm answering your question.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I think we at CIPE definitely think a lot about how sort of the untapped market potential of women takes away from an economy's GDP. So even just hearing that 80% of women in business are in the informal economy, that's such a huge portion of the economy that contributes so much to GDP overall.
Yeah.
So thank you for that question. And please continue to ask your questions in the chat as we're waiting for a few more to come through. I might turn to our esteemed chairperson, Cecile, to talk a little bit about the upcoming elections. So with the national elections in PNG just around the corner, which policies in the document do you anticipate will be a key focus for the Business Advocacy Network over the next couple of months?
Thank you, Erin, and morning to everybody who's participating today for this launch. Good to see you all online. In response to your question, Erin, I think what's been done recently, you know, during 2019 and a bit into 2020 was the review that was done on the organic law on the national and local level government elections. And part of that was addressing the TSM, the temporary special measures. So I think, you know, coming up into the 2022 elections, it's really around whether that will actually come into play. At the moment, I think we're pressed for time. I believe there's a parliament sitting, I think tomorrow, today, possibly, I think it is. So I'm not sure if it's part of the agenda, but it would be one of those recommendations from there. Would be good to see the TSMs come into place. But as part of the, you know, PNG ban work, is also to look at setting up special parliamentary committee around this particular topic, so that you can look at other factors as well that enable and assist women to get into political office. So it might mean looking at considering things like political party affiliations. How do you garner support for that? The security aspect of women going into politics, especially on the campaign trail. Looking at the mechanisms for funding, because we all know that it needs funding to launch some of these campaigns. So how do we look at different enabling mechanisms for that? So that would be, and also, you know, other policies that affect that. You know, the main aim, if we get someone into parliament, we hope that that person can also look at issues that affect women. So some of those issues were mentioned today in the various platforms. I think Vani mentioned a bit on business and how the barriers and challenges to that. And then Brenda talked a bit about the informal economy and how we have a large number of women there that really needs support, especially the vulnerable groups. And then Salia talked a bit about how do we get women into the formal economy, looking at incentives for getting the unbanked banked. So with being able to have elected politicians at that highest decision-making level will hopefully enable some of these policies that will be better for us across the board in terms of some of the barriers that we face and the challenges.
Thank you. That's very helpful. So I see we have another question in the chat that's come through, and this one is generalized. So whoever whatever panelist feels comfortable can feel free to jump in and answer. Women with disabilities are often not represented in mainstream development initiatives, either as representatives on boards or committees, etc. And the attendee has specifically noted that this question is directed to mainstream agencies and not for women with disabilities to answer. So I think in general, the question is seeking to ask, how can we ensure meaningful inclusion for women with disabilities. And I'll let whichever panelist would like to jump in take this question.
Erin, I think I'll go first, if that's okay. I think that to get, more people with disabilities to be represented, I think that it's up to businesses as well as those in, especially like if you're looking at private sector for boards, to actually think about, scoping the actual role to be inclusive. So having a space on there to have a representative, because I think that once you create a space, and it's the same for if you're looking at landowner companies and female representation, for example, if you create a space specifically for them, it means that it becomes normalized, mainstream. So it means that it will act as an enabler to get more people with disabilities or women onto boards, for example. So I think the onus is really up to the organization or, organizations like us acting as a collective to actually advocate for a shift in some of the way that they structure their policies to enable that participation.
Thank you. That was an excellent answer. Brenda, I'll let you jump in as well.
Thanks, Erin. I think just to add on to that, in terms of inclusion, it needs to be intentional, and it needs to be holistically considered. So in the case of, say, the work that UN Women's been doing in markets specifically, we look at creating voice mechanisms right at the market level through to decision-making levels, where you have market vendors associations that form within markets to become collective bodies that represents women's voices. And often we find that, in most markets that we work in, women with disability are not catered for. They're often left out in terms of planning for the actual infrastructure itself, accessibility to markets. And then, at that very lowest level of the economy, there's no avenues provided. So you can imagine the challenges as you go up into the various stages of the informal economy, and as you're transitioning into formal, there is limited intentional products. It has to be done deliberately to make sure that they're involved. So a good example I'd like to just speak about briefly is the case for Lay Market, where they've created what they call local market management committees. And within those committees, they require representatives from DPOs to participate, disabled persons organizations. And they ensure that in those discussions, considerations around accessibility to markets, services that are more accessible in terms of access to banking facilities, for instance, having agents placed within markets so that you can have banking done within markets itself. And they came up with some innovative ideas. They have DPOs represented in those local committees. And the kinds of interventions, the training programs that they run, look exclusively at making sure that vendors with disability are prioritized. So that's just an example of what can happen if you intentionally plan for and include disabled persons reps in various platforms and voice mechanisms. So obviously, we cannot really plan and speak on behalf of persons with disability. They need to be included themselves in the discussion, and to be included themselves in designing of interventions, be included in policy discussions, and to be included in any platforms that look at reviewing government policies and programs, development partners who come up with initiatives. Often I see that much of the engagement is tokenistic. It's only to tick the box. So we need to look at how do you intentionally plan to engage with DPO representatives and how they participate in the economy, and actually provides concrete steps and solutions and budgets to deliver such interventions. I think just before I close, I'd like to say that there's a national audit of the informal economy was concluded by the Department for Community Development in 2018, which revealed that the informal economy is worth 12 billion per annum, and over 60% of the informal economy workers are women. So it does contribute significantly to the local economy and the GDP. So just to finish off there, thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. And I see that our esteemed Deputy Chair, Jacqueline, has her hand raised. So I will let Jacqueline jump in.
Thank you, Erin. I just wanted to also, for the two speakers, our chair, Cecile and Brenda, I just wanted to add on to their responses. I think for persons with disability, we have this saying, nothing about us without us. And I agree that for persons with disabilities to be, I think there has to be deliberate action to involve persons with disabilities or women with disabilities in any programs or activities. And I think one classic example is the PNG ban, the composition of this committee, and especially with the representation, my representation on behalf of women with disabilities and persons with disabilities on this committee. I think that was a very deliberate attempt to have us involved and to have a voice in terms of how women with disabilities can be included more. And it's also a call on government to review its current legislation and policies to ensure that these mechanisms actually are more inclusive and enable women or persons with disability to have access to basic services. But I agree with what's been said. Like this have to be very deliberate actions that are targeted to be more inclusive and mainstreaming disability, regardless of whatever program, or even in the decision-making level at different levels. It's important for our voices to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. And Luania has just messaged me that she would like to jump in too. So perhaps Luania will give you the last word before we deliver just a closing message.
Thanks, Erin. I just wanted to add on to what the discussions on that particular question. So, I mean, everyone's focused on the committee level, making the push for a seat to, for allowances to be available. But I think this is more a challenge to the boards that are out there already, in particular the building board, NCD, the government, from a practical point of view. Perhaps you could just look at, accessibility, just the buildings, making that something that is standard. I believe that type of action will normalize the push and have a much more profound effect on ensuring that there's participation at committee levels. If we see it every day, it becomes something that's normal to us. It's not something we need to make special allocation for. And I think that's something that probably should be looked at and given some thought to. I know it's come up in our discussions over the years with CIPE and the SC, and obviously with Jackie providing her guidance. So I just wanted to add that note in as well, just to support the answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Luania. Well, thank you to all of our panelists for such an engaging conversation. I hope it was a great start to your morning, and it was certainly a great end to my day. So just before we close out, we have one final congratulatory video to share from CIPE's Managing Director for Programs, Abdul-Alkepsi.
Good evening. My name is Abdul-Alkepsi, the Managing Director for Programs at the Center for International Private Enterprise. And on behalf of CIPE, on behalf of our Center for Women's Economic Empowerment, and on behalf of our Asia and Pacific team, I want to thank you for attending our virtual event. I also want to congratulate you. I want to congratulate the PNG Business Advocacy Network, BAN, especially the steering committee leadership. And today's launch, as we all know, is just the start. The launch is the start, the beginning. It's a process for sustainable expansion of economic opportunities for women of Papua New Guinea. And we all know also that when there are economic opportunities for women, women lead, women innovate, not just for themselves and their families, but for their communities and for their country. I remember when we all met the first time. It was my first visit to the country, this wonderful, beautiful country. It was November 2019 at the PNG Women's Forum that was hosted by Ambassador Catherine Abert-Gray and attended by the Prime Minister, James Marape, who gave a wonderful speech. And then I remember how excited we were after the event. I came back in February 2020 when the network was formed. We were at the room together, and I remember the excitement, I remember the hope, I remember how much potential there was for changing lives for so many women in Papua New Guinea. But I also remember how humbled I was to be in that room amongst all of you. I remember just looking at what can be done, what all of you can do for women in Papua New Guinea. Now, I urge you to move forward. I urge you to go and advocate for the changes that were presented in the recommendations. I wish you the best of luck. I want to tell you, CIPE and our teams will be with you along the way. Thank you for allowing us to be part of this. Goodbye.
All right. Well, thank you again all so much for your active participation in this event. This has been a wonderful opportunity to hear more about the priorities of women in business in the lead up to the PNG national elections, and more broadly as we move through the COVID-19 pandemic and a myriad of other challenges. To read a copy of the Women's Business Agenda, you may feel free to email CIPE at png@cipe.org and keep an eye out for the WBA, which will soon become available on the PNG WBRC website. And my colleague Hannah has dropped a link to that in the answered questions box. So one more time, we would just like to extend a big thank you to our panelists, the steering committee of the PNG BAN, and finally to the United States Department of State Bureau for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor for generous support to this initiative. Thank you all so much and enjoy the rest of your day.